Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back to the show. We are joined here again by Thomas Bergvik. Exciting to have him back here talking as a licensed professional counselor about so many things that are important to us that he can help you with. And I know we have a nice show in store today. It's an hour episode here. For those tuning in on the podcast, we're also live on Zoom and vice versa. So I get to see him face to face again. Welcome back, Thomas. How are you?
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. For those that may not know you yet, Thomas, please introduce yourself. Tell us about what it is that you do.
Hi, my name is Tom Bergvik. I'm a licensed professional counselor practicing in Hamden, Connecticut. I've been in private practice since 2011, and it was actually something I've been wanting to do well before I did that. I mean, it was like my plan was to go to graduate school, which I did, and I graduated with a master's at the age of 60. But I've had a ton of experience prior to that. I haven't talked too much about my background, but today's a good day to do that because we have so much time. My experience working in mental health and in health services in general goes back to 1971. Wow. I know it's for a lot of people, it's like, what?
Yeah, you don't look old enough. For those who are not seeing him, but he does not look old enough. But okay, I'll believe you. Okay.
I was an orderly at Masonic Home and Hospital, and while I was working there, there was a licensed practical nurse who said that that Connecticut Valley was looking for people to work as a psychiatric aide, and so I decided to apply at Connecticut Valley Hospital. And I worked there in geriatrics for 3 years. And then my wife and I had been living in Middletown, Connecticut, which is in central Connecticut. And then I grew up in West Haven, and we actually ended up moving to where I grew up, in the house that I grew up in, and lived there for 2 years. My mother owned that house plus the one next door. So we had a little Bergvik compound going there. And then after 2 years, we thought about getting a place of our own, and we saw a condo available, and we ended up moving to East Haven. Now, how that relates is that Connecticut Valley Hospital was in Middletown. So I was making a commute from West Haven to Middletown every day. And so I wanted someplace closer. When an opportunity came up in New Haven at Connecticut Mental Health Center, I applied there and decided to transfer over there because it was also a state facility. And ended up working on the research unit. And while at the same time, I was working on completing my undergraduate degree in long-term, which turned out to be long-term care administration, was originally health services administration. And it was like going back to school, working on the research unit. First of all, it was like, as I often described it, it was like going from the outhouse to the penthouse, in the sense of, now everybody was interested in what the staff said, and they looked at me, and it's like they wanted to know what I thought, and it was like a total revelation, because when I was working at Connecticut Valley Hospital, it was like just the opposite. And so I got to learn a lot about psychiatry, and learned how to do individual therapy, family therapy, group therapy, multi-family therapy, and it was a great experience. And the head of the unit once was asked how long the staff actually work there, and his response was, for as long as they need to.
Wow.
And what he was basically saying is that the staff who go there for the experience, and also to learn, because we were working with the Yale docs.
Wow.
And we worked in a team environment. Basically, we were teaching first-year residents about how our system worked, and we were telling the first-year residents we were the ones in charge.
Yeah.
And that was for them a big experience, change, because they were used to giving out orders, and now they were having to listen to us.
Wow.
So, I mean, the whole experience was something I look back towards fondly, because it was like I didn't realize it at the time, but it set the stage for me down the road as to what I was really good at, because I realized that the patients there really listened. I was able to listen to them, and they felt like I got them. And so anyway, after I left there, I was just about ready to complete my degree. I got my license as a nursing home administrator, and that was beginning of the 80s, which I look at as at back. It's like it was awful. I mean, it was like one bad experience after another. And I'm not going to go into the details, but it was basically I was in my 30s at the time, and I was basically searching when I look back at it as to really what made me happy. It wasn't nursing home administration. I was in insurance for three years. I realized that I really didn't like selling insurance, so that was not going to be my thing.
Yeah.
I did, as stubborn as I can be sometimes, I did try to get back into running, working as an assistant administrator. Then I had the opportunity to run my own place. I had my own place. I was a 15-bed facility for developmentally disabled and profoundly developmentally disabled and medically fragile clients. That was not a good experience, and I finally sold that. And I had to face facts. I like working directly with people. I don't like working over them. And so then I started working with people who had traumatic brain injury, as well as developmental disabilities, with the eye towards getting back into mental health, which is what I did in '95. That's where I went to Hartford, and I worked as a case manager there, and I was there for over 8 years, and it was a good experience. I mean, I really had a lot of success working with those clients. As I might have mentioned in another show, towards the end, when I left there, all my clients were at their highest level of functioning. I took a break, and then I got a job with also Cornerstone. No, excuse me, before that. I was working with Homes for the Brave in Bridgeport, and working with veterans, mostly veterans. And again, my counseling skills came into effect. I was starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it was kind of obvious. And I also had been, prior to that, I had periodically taken some graduate courses in social work to see if I could actually do it if I matriculated, and I did well. Yeah. And so anyway, to make a long story short, I started graduate school in 2007. I completed in 2011. I also worked, as I mentioned, at also Cornerstone in a group home. And then I graduated, tried to get a job in working with my degree, but I'd already done some of the stuff that somebody out of school, usually when they get their graduate degree, and we had to complete 3,000 hours, we were going to have to do work like being a case manager to get our time in. And I'd already done that. So there was nothing left for me to learn in that regard. So I just decided, okay, I'll start my own practice, because I knew what I needed to do. I'd already been through it, been doing this kind of work for, at that point, for, off and on for 40 years.
Wow. Wow. Like, oh, no.
And so, and it turned out to be the right decision. I got one of my old supervisors that I worked with on the research unit. She was in private practice. She she was an advanced practice registered nurse. She agreed to supervise me. And that's how I got started.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Motivated man.
Yeah, I know in some ways I'm very unusual, because, and you've heard the expression late bloomer. If there was ever a late bloomer, it's me. I recognize that. So anyway, what we're going to be talking about today is post-traumatic stress disorder, and in particular intergenerational post-traumatic stress disorder. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, I think, considering what's going on in the Ukraine, I can't help but think that everybody that is affected by, and I've got a Ukrainian client, and she's affected by it, even though she's living here, because she's got a grandmother that's over there and friends. And every day this war goes on, it's trauma all over again. From it, even though she's not in the middle of it,
Yeah.
she still experiences, and she's growing. You know, every day she's concerned about the possibility of maybe somebody that she knows dying because of the violence over there. And I'm really concerned about the Ukraine. Even the ones that have gotten out, they're going into these refugee camps. That in of itself can be obviously very traumatic. You're having to pick up from your home and basically take what's on your backs for the most part. You know, you see trauma happening in this country when there is a tornado that may destroy your house, or you know, a hurricane, flooding, all those experiences that we have in this country, and you don't walk away from that without some residual effects on you. And things like nightmares, you're really having an agitated, startled reflex thing. You know, you jump at things that normally wouldn't have bothered you before. And some people are so affected by it. And I think about my father, because he went through it big time in the war. That's why he became an alcoholic, because did I tell you his story?
I don't remember.
He was in World War II. He was born in Norway, and he was on the Norwegian Merchant Marines. And then when Norway was taken over, he decided to join the American Merchant Marines.
Wow.
And then he became part of the Army in transport services. And so he was on a total, and I found all this out after he passed away, which is not a good time to find things out like this. That he was on a total, I think, about 19 ships going back and forth on the North Atlantic. And if you know anything about history, there was a lot of German U-boats that were sinking merchant ships. Of those 19, 11 of those ships eventually sank. Three of the ships he was on, 2 of them were sunk by torpedo, and the other one was by a collision with another ship.
Wow. And
he also survived a plane crash in Manila Bay. He was one of 13 people with seatbelts on. It's kind of hard to describe whether he was lucky, which I think most of us would say, yeah, extremely lucky. But he had to deal with the residual effects of surviving all that. And I'm sure part of it was guilt issues, but it was also, he had nightmares for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Every night he would go to bed and he couldn't get away from the war, which is I think was what led him to drinking. That's why he ended up becoming an alcoholic. And I knew him as an alcoholic. I didn't know the background story. It would have been very, very helpful looking back if I had known that. But nobody talked about the war. I knew he had shrapnel in his leg. I asked my mother one time, how did he get shrapnel in his leg? And I swear to God, she said, I don't know. Now, here's the problem with that. My father was her husband.
Okay.
She was a nurse, a teacher, and she was also she served some time in the service as a nurse. In fact, it was just after the war she was introduced to my father by his ex-wife.
Wow.
I think for whatever reason, she was trying to protect me. And so that leads us into intergenerational post-traumatic stress disorder. And what that is that the traumas of one generation can sometimes affect the next generation, including war trauma. In this country, it's most prevalent among African Americans because of the history of slavery, and Native Americans because of how their land was taken over by Europeans. And that hasn't stopped. that the effects of that has not stopped. How do you see that? Well, I don't know enough about the Native Americans to say anything other than the fact that they've had generational poverty. With African Americans, it has been also poverty, but it's also been about the effects of not having a father around. I read a book on this called The Internal Enemy, which spoke about slavery from 1750 to 1830. And when I read that book, I was very interested in see if it applied to today. And what I noticed was there was one part they talked about, it was about Virginia and Maryland and the history there. And there was a point in time where a lot of the slave masters in particular were concerned about the rise in population of African Americans. And so they decided to be able to control that. They basically shipped a lot of the men to other reservation or slave camps or whatever you want to call them, further down south around Kentucky and so forth, which meant that the kids were growing up without their fathers. So there was a lot of women that were heading the household. Now, that fear of actually being taken over by African Americans, it continues to this day. Mm-hmm. I think the election of Donald Trump was a reflection of that because of Obama's 2 terms in office. I think a lot of the stuff that's going on in the Republican Party right now is definitely a backlash by white people about the fear of losing control of this country. And so, and the other thing is, all you got to do when it comes to individual families, all families tend to, when they're raising the children, they raise their children based on what they observe their parents doing in terms of what their style is. And it doesn't matter what culture you come from, what race or whatever, we all do that. One of my heroes, Dr. Jeffrey Canada from the Harlem Children's Zone, I read up on him. One of the things he observed was when he noticed how parents discipline their children, he noticed a lot of Caucasian families using timeouts, and they were also focusing on what the kid did wrong. This is why you're having a timeout, whatever that thing was. When he noticed with the African American parents, quite often they use negative reinforcement. They didn't focus on what the kid did wrong. They basically focused on the child. And in the process, took away a lot of their sense of hope of being something someday. So what his goal is, and one of these days, I'll tell you, if I continue with the podcast, one of these days, I swear to God, I'm going to see if I can get him to come on, because it would be a fantastic opportunity to talk about his perception of what my perception is of what he's been doing. And secondly, to talk about more in detail what his experiences have been. Mm-hmm. So anyway, what he did was he trained, he basically talked to the parents and talked about more effective ways of being parenting, including disciplining. And and from what I understand, he's been incredible in the level of success. He follows those kids from the time they're born until right through college. And his success rate is phenomenal. I'm for one, and I've said this when I was even completing graduate school, that I would love it if they used his program, his type of program plan. It should be done everywhere in this country, because I think it is proven to be successful. My understanding is that in some places they are doing it. But I think if it doesn't have to be just in the city. You can do it like in Appalachia, where there's a lot of negative, because when you grow up in poverty, it's kind of hard to be positive. So you're trying to get yourself out of it. And if we can find ways of helping them to be able to move forward as opposed to staying in place, I couldn't think of a better way to go than to really follow his footsteps.
Oh, beautiful. Getting to know Tom. We should have had a title for this podcast up and flashing on the TV screen. Getting to know Tom. Really, it's great to hear. Everyone has a unique individual story, and to know what made you, your family background, your upbringing, and your drive, and what you're doing today makes you, who you are. It's unique to every individual. So thank you for sharing all this. I'm glad we have the time today to actually sit and talk.
Yeah, and that's why I really feel that I was thinking about what do I really want to do, because I feel like I've covered so many different areas, but trauma hasn't been one. And I'm also looking for something that is now, something that's affecting people now. And actually, I think the pandemic has been traumatic for people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many different, people can call in and talk about an experience they've had that's affected them long term. And I think that would be to talk to them about that and to help them get through it is, I think, would be one of the best ways that we could spend our time, because I think it would be a learning opportunity for other people that are listening, because none of us go through life without trauma. The experience, just having the experience of losing a parent, or God forbid, a child. I don't know if you remember this, but I'm gonna throw this at you. My sister-in-law lost her grandson in a tractor accident. He was 3 years old. What's the name of the shock jock out of New York that everybody listens to?
Used to be Opie and Anthony.
No.
Howard Stern.
Howard Stern.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Howard Stern apparently was flying overhead right over the farm, because this happened in New York.
Oh my gosh.
Upstate New York. You remember that?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That was my sister-in-law.
Oh, tragic.
And his father, after that happened, his father died at the age of 40 from a heart attack. I don't know how my sister-in-law was able to continue, considering the loss, those two losses, because there is no explanation for it. My great nephew's uncle was driving the tractor when that happened.
So the guilt comes with that.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not like I'm talking from just theory.
Really experience.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people out there have lost loved ones under very tragic conditions. Was it in New York that somebody very recently, within the last week, a Marine was killed in a bouncer situation?
Yeah, I heard that. Firefighter. But there's always something.
What do you tell that mother to make sense of it? There is no making sense of it. He survives. I don't know if he saw any action, but if he survived the war and then gets killed when he's at a nightclub or a bar or whatever, there's no words to explain it.
And I have a friend who lost her son. He was, I think, 13, my mom's friend, right? And growing up, that was tragic. That was hard. And now some people recover. My mom could never understand how she could recover, and she went back to work and she was able to, and now she has grandkids, she has this, and life just went on. Some people, you know, take things differently. Then my mom's cousin lost a daughter at 12 in a horrible car accident on Long Island, and it went up in flames, and she passed away like 5 years after her daughter from drugs and alcohol, because that is how she took it. Everybody handles things so differently.
My experience working with it, not that I've had a lot, but the little I have worked with it, I have really asked that they suggest, that they consider doing a memorial for, especially if they're a little bit older and they've shown experiences. And you see this all the time. If a young person shows interest in a particular area, that they do a memorial for that. There's a school built in Connecticut for one of the victims of what happened in Newtown. Did I tell you I knew one of the first responders?
No, I never heard this story. You didn't know at the time.
Let me correct that. I didn't know him, but my oldest daughter's friend's husband was a policeman. He was a first responder. He really suffered PTSD from that. There was a teacher from that school that I actually played pickup basketball at Newtown High, because I used to play basketball on the weekend at Newtown High. And one of the guys that played there was a teacher in that school. On the street where the shooter lived was the same street as my daughter's ex-in-laws lived on, which is why I often say about Connecticut, whatever, if it affects the whole state. When something like this, it affects the whole state. Even if you don't have a direct connection, it affects you, because we're such a small, it's like we're a family. And so PTSD is all around us for whatever reason, either because of the family or because of what happens around us. There was a Korean flight that was shot down by the Russians. I knew one of the victims on that plane. Wow. She was an insurance client of mine, but she was also active in her church. Her minister knew her. I knew that minister when I was doing my administrative internship. And he told me about his experience knowing her. I mean, it's like, there's so many connections here that sometimes disasters can affect you in a very personal way.
No.
And I remember her talking about the trip. She was taking a trip, I think, to South Korea, and she was looking forward to it. And all of a sudden, everything went, obviously, she never made it. So I know this is, for some people, it's probably one of the most depressing topics to talk about, but it's also very real.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to understand that if you've gone through something like this, that there is a way to get help.
And there's nothing you could do to prepare for it, is there?
No.
Right?
Trauma is trauma, and it can affect you. It can affect you today or tomorrow or whenever. And you don't know. I mean, sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. I mean, there was a tornado that went through, no kidding. I mean, Connecticut's not known for its tornadoes, you know. But this is the one, this was the time when I don't know if you've heard about this one. It went through Hamden, and part of it, it destroyed Sleeping Giant because all the trees were knocked down. Well, a twister came through in the neighborhood right down the street from where I live. right across the street from my son lived, and happened to hit a pole, and the pole went down on the house. Luckily, nobody was hurt. But you know as well as I do, tornadoes have a way of being very finicky. They can hit one house, totally destroy it, and the house next door is totally untouched.
Yeah, you're right.
And Mount Carmel's across the street from my alma mater where I get my undergraduate. Quinnipiac.
Wow.
In Connecticut, we just don't think about tornadoes because A, because they don't happen often, and B, because we're hilly. You think of tornadoes going through areas where there's flat land all over the place.
I had one in Whitestone when I used to live in Queens. We were shocked, but it took off the furniture off of my my balcony. My furniture gone. Took it. It was a few years ago when I lived there. Yeah. And it's like, what? A tornado in Whitestone and College Point in Queens? It happened. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Didn't hurt anyone, but lucky I lived in a condo, and so the top floor, the balcony area, it went over into like the main lot of the condo thing and didn't right onto the cement and the grass. So it didn't hurt anyone or anything, but the next door neighbor's furniture was still there.
Yeah. So, I mean, not that you ever could. I mean, we were talking about how life can be fickle. And somebody actually said, it was a joke. And he was saying, anytime somebody says they have plans, God laughs.
Yeah. Remind our listeners who we're speaking to, if you don't mind, to give us your contact information as well.
Yeah, Tom Bergvik, Bergvik Counseling Services. I can be reached at tabergvik@gmail.com. My phone number is 203-917-7674. If you look up Bergvik Counseling Services, you'll find my website. In fact, I've got some podcasts that you can download and listen to other episodes of this show and find out more about me.
Thank you. And if you guys have any questions as we continue talking, you're more than welcome to call in 631-317-1291, 631-317-1291. No question off limits, I should say. Any topic.
Yeah. Any topic. We don't have to talk about PTSD. If you want to talk about addictions, which we have had a call in, dealing with grief, we dealt with that. If you have a family member or yourself dealing with issues like anxiety, depression, relationship issues, be happy to talk with you. Nothing's off topic here. So
great. We are here talking again, Thomas Bergvik. Let me ask you this. So as a licensed professional health counselor, with what you do, you're working with individuals most of the time, but couples when it comes to relationships. Absolutely. Do you have a niche that you prefer more than anything? Like a true passion to you would be what?
I'll tell you, I say I really like working with couples. And here's the thing: a lot of therapists, some therapists don't like working with couples because it's uncomfortable. I think in some cases, for some therapists, it brings up personal issues that sometimes can affect them in terms of trying to be actually objective in a couple situation. I like working with them because I like to help clients maintain their relationships. And interspersed with that, which is one of the reasons why I'm working towards certification in sex therapy, are sexual issues that come up. And you'd be surprised how it can come up. I actually had a couple who where they hadn't had sex in 5 years because they were married. They stayed a virgin. They remained a virgin until after they got married, and for whatever reason, they never consummated the relationship. I think I had maybe 1 or 2 sessions, and they finally broke the ice, so to speak.
And finally, things got better?
And finally things got much better, you know?
Wow.
A lot of it has to, I'm dealing with people who have issues with ED, and a lot of it's performance anxiety related. Yeah.
All comes from within, our own inner
absolutely
doubts.
As I say, if it doesn't happen up here in the head, it's not going to happen below the waist either. And so helping them get out of their heads sometimes, in the sense of being concerned about what the end result's going to be. I try to emphasize the journey. The journey can be a lot of fun if you allow it to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the thing. And the other thing is getting out of, especially for men, getting out of this control mindset. They have to know everything. No, they don't. Sometimes their partner is more experienced than they are.
Yeah.
And let their partner teach them. You know, that's okay. Letting go of control, if you really are interested in resolving your issue, can be a path to being happier in the long run.
Good.
And I was speaking to a woman about this, and she said, you know, that kind of performance anxiety can happen with women too. Of course it can.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't get into the mindset, well, that's a man's problem. And the other thing, which I was, when I've been working with this, a lot of women think it's their fault if men can't perform, because a lot of women don't come across this experience, you know, this problem. And when they do, it's like, what's wrong with me? And it's like, no, it's nothing. It has less to do with you, and it has to do with him. So, you know, helping people sort of like resolve that kind of an issue, that's important, because sex is a part of life. It's part of being in a relationship. It's not, you know, and you got to treat it accordingly. You got to feel that you can do what you can. It's all about being confident in yourself. And that's why I put it in the performance anxiety realm, because if you think about it, there's a lot of things in life where for whatever reason or another, you have one bad experience, and it can lead into like this whole, like a domino effect. It's like, if it happens once, you feel like it's going to happen the next time and the next time. And if you really think that, you could be talking yourself into something like ED, or if you're you're a stage performer, you go through one of those situations where you're not performing as well as you used to because of your lack of confidence. Lack of confidence in life is everything.
Yeah.
You couldn't do what you're doing if you weren't confident with.
Yeah, I guess, right? But you don't even think about it. But did you try to instill that in my kids are, 5 and 7, and they wake up and I put them in the mirror every day. The 7-year-old hates it. The 5-year-old laughs and is giddy, but look in the mirror, tell yourself you're beautiful, you're amazing, you're going to have a great day, and just try to boost their self-confidence, because I know not everybody has that. And it's hard to say something positive, an affirmation about yourself but I think it's going to help inspire them to be better people. It might sound silly, but it's something little as that is what I'm trying to do with them to boost their own morale in a sense.
I think personally, coaching.
Oh, we have a call.
Coaches,
stand by. Hi, welcome to the show. You are live on the line. Who's this?
Hi, my name is Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mary. How you doing?
Line. Hi, how are you?
Good. So what's up?
Well, excuse me. Well, my question is, I was married for 10 years to a very abusive man, and I left when the abuse turned towards my children. I don't trust any man near myself or my children, and I was wondering how I can get over this fear.
You know, I'm surprised that more women don't have this problem, to be honest with you. I can't say that I'm surprised that you have this problem, but it really comes down to understanding that not all men are abusive, which is easier said than done. And being able to make sure, by the way, I think I look at what people's backgrounds are, and sometimes our choices are reflected by our experiences, how they with their parents. What was there any issues that you think might be a red flag as far as when you were growing up?
I don't know if it would be a red flag. I mean, my parents, I mean, they were strong. I mean, they disciplined us, not like how I would discipline my children.
Okay.
But they never really got out of hand.
Okay, so no abuse. Okay, that's important. Okay, that's a good sign. So, and I would use that as a jumping off point for yourself, recognizing that your father wasn't abusive. And so understanding that it's just a matter of being much more careful the next time around when you meet somebody, and basically doing your homework, doing, a lot of people meet people through the dating sites. Some are better than others. My son actually met his wife through eHarmony. I mean, I look at them as like $1 million couple, because she's a child psychologist and he's a high school English teacher. And if there's any two parents that you want somebody with that kind of a background.
Right.
And so, and the reason I like them is because they go thoroughly through your background. They ask questions that reflect their concern about who you are, so that any prospective date knows who the person is before they even say hello.
Yeah. Right.
Aside from that, having, people that asking them about any potential people, guys that might be available for you, that they know might be a good fit for you, because your friends know you better than anybody else outside of your parents.
Right.
And so I'm sure that your friends would watch out for, make sure that they didn't invite or introduce you to anybody that might be abusive again.
Okay.
Is this helpful?
Yes, it is. It is. I've never even thought about it that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can get over this. It's just a matter of actually sometimes just asking for help, so that, and it comes down to self-confidence too. I think your self-confidence was kind of shaken up by having an abusive relationship, because you sometimes wonder, it's like, what did I miss?
Yeah.
And sometimes you blame yourself for that.
Very much. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Have a
Take care.
Day, sweetheart. Best of luck to you. All right, ThomasBergvik.com. Again, that's ThomasBergvik.com. If you have any questions, 631-317-1291. We have 15 minutes left in the show. Wow, I had that 14. Okay, but wow, awesome. What else are we going to cover today? This has been a good show. Thank you for the call. Wow.
Yeah, that was a great call. And like I said, I'm serious. It's like, I'm thinking that if I were in an abusive relationship with a woman, I might think twice about getting into another relationship, because you start looking at it, it's like, what?
Yeah.
What did I see in that person?
Mm-hmm.
And, because things happen. Sometimes, with women like her, or just with people like her, who ended or go into a relationship thinking that this person is very, is everything they want. And then they end up finding out that it was, you know, all a mirage. That once they got closer to them, they realized their true colors are coming out. Kind of makes you wonder. It's like, okay, so how do I protect myself from this? And, you know, the only thing you can do, and I think this is why it's important to find out what the background information of the person is, because they might be able to hide it from you in terms of how they present themselves. But if they have a track record and you know about those, you can somehow find out about that background information that really helps you determine whether this person is a good match for you or he or she is not.
True. Oof, that's a good episode. We could do a whole show on Jill and her relationships. No, let's not.
Yeah.
But and why yeah, we all have our issues and why we are traumas and we don't trust and we don't. Yeah. But it got me thinking.
Yeah, I mean, relationships, I tell people all the time, trust and communication are your top two, and the ability to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we all make mistakes in life. And sometimes the mistakes we make are potentially relationship threatening. Trust is a hard thing to recover if you've lost it.
Yeah.
And that there is no understating that. I've worked with couples where, you know, one person or the other can recover the trust, and others that it's just not happening. Just they tried and they can't. I mentioned a couple. I think I talked about this couple about 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, and he gave me a call just the other night saying that he's decided to file for divorce. He couldn't get through the being cheated on.
Yeah.
And I know she had learned her lesson because she learned why she was cheating. And it came down to lack of self-confidence, not feeling like she was getting the attention she wanted. And so she felt like she needed that reinforcement by being with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason for everything. It's not always just black and white. There's a lot of gray in between.
Wow. And now you've been married for how many years?
Yeah, October 20th will make it 49.
That's insane. How do you do it? I'm sure you've had your ups and downs, right? It's just, yeah.
Absolutely. And there were times where my wife will tell you, there were times where she felt like she just wanted to, she told me, one story she talks about is she wanted to give me back to mother. And my mother's response was, I'm sorry, but the warranty's out.
Uh-huh.
She stuck with me. But more seriously, she said, if you agree on the big things, that's what's important. You know, you're going to have your ups and downs, but as long as you agree on the big things. I mean, look, I don't care who you are. There are going to be times where you're going to, don't mean this literally, but you're going to want to kill each other. And it's like, but then you get over it. Everybody's been there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any couple that hasn't had their knockdown, drag out fight about something. I had a client this morning, we were talking about how men and women listen. And the topic of selective listening came up. And I said, look, you're right. I mean, sometimes what we think is being said is not exactly the message being given.
Mm-hmm.
And none of us are not guilty of that.
True.
And I just want to say, Jill, this has been fun. I mean, the time that you and I have been working together, I know I said this last week and I do mean it. And and if I can be able to continue doing this, I will certainly look forward to doing it again.
Thank you. It's a pleasure having you here. It's been fun. You're always full of energy. You're so comfortable in your own skin. Like the way you sit in your chair, body language, just very comfortable, very just like the down to earth guy that you want to sit next to at a bar to talk to. Like, you know, you don't come across confrontational. You don't come across mean or, those are good things. So people open up to people like you who feel comfortable. So you also have to make them feel that way, but you just naturally have that clearly. And that's why you're good at what you do. But
yeah, and it's been a process like everything else. And I think it just comes from, who I've been most of my life.
Yeah.
And as I've gotten older, I've become more self-confident. I mean, I was a kid, I was shy. One of the things I wish I had was a basketball coach that would have helped me with my self-confidence, because that's where it's at. I mean, I don't care who you are, you need somebody who believes in you.
Yeah.
And if you get that, you're fortunate, because then there's no limits on what you can accomplish in life.
Now, just curious, was your basketball coach not just a comforting,
I have a
positive
story
affirmation person?
Yeah.
That's something that's affected you, that little trauma.
Oh yeah. Let's see. We got time. Okay. It was an assistant basketball coach. I'll never forget this. Who was never exactly, shall we say, encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we happened to bowl at the same time. And I was usually a pretty good bowler, even as a kid. And I just had a bad game. And his response was, "Looks like you're as good a bowler as you are a basketball player." Which really made my day. But in high school, there was a change after my sophomore year. And I did come out my junior year, went to practice and everything. And I had gone 3 years to basketball camp. I know there was nobody else on my team that went to basketball camp. I really think it's important for coaches to know who your players are. I mean, really know who they are. And that effort was never made. And so I just got it in my head and said, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore. If I was really mature, it would have been the reason I'm playing basketball, because I really enjoyed playing. But I wasn't getting the feedback that I needed. So I just decided, that's it, I'm done. And I never went back. What I did get, though, was comments from my teammates. So, coach is asking about you. And then my mother, who's a teacher, actually met him, and he asked her, "What happened to me? Where was he? He could have come to me." It wasn't like I was missing in action. Yeah. It's like I was going to classes. And I know it was like, yes, it has stuck with me, this story. But I had to make peace with it, because bottom line is, okay, I was a kid. I basically took the position. I was done with it. But at the same time, I had coaches who basically let me down. He had an opportunity to know who I was. And if he was really going to be a good coach, he could have helped me reinforce my abilities and help me with my self-confidence, where I could have been a much better basketball player. And I never got that. And that was a teaching moment in my life. And I recognized how important it was to encourage people and to believe in them, for them to be able to be the best that they can be.
Well, thank you. Let's also tell everyone how we can reach out to you.
My name is Tom Bergvik. I can reach me at ta.bergvik at gmail.com, bergvikcounselingservices.com. My phone number is 203-917-7674. And I look forward to talking to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you here again, joining us for this extra long edition of your show, Thomas Bergvik. Thank you. So are we together again next week?
Oh, we'll see.
All right. I hope so.
I'm waiting for the word.
All right. Good. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
You
Bye-bye.
take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.